Hi, this is Mick Holly. This is our third and final video talking about our financial results mastery course. One thing that I wanted to impress upon you is that this course is not, all about the numbers. You don't need to be a financial whiz to be able to get the benefit out of it. I remember I was sent in one of my corporate lives over to INSEAD, which is one of the best business schools in Europe. It's just outside Paris, and I remember having a whole week of intensive executive education, and 3 days of that education was all about how to understand the financial statements so that I could become financially more literate. And I have to say that having been on that course, when I left I was more confused than when I began. It really was quite intimidating. There were a lot of people in the audience who were very facile with the numbers and could arrive at conclusions with much greater speed, so it was very intimidating. We spent a lot of money, the company spent a lot of money on me and taking me through that training, and I didn't really get a lot out of it. Now, what we're doing with our course is we're taking the numbers out of it, we're talking about meaning, we're talking about how we can help you connect that to business improvement and to projects. So I just wanted to take that out of it, because what we're going to reveal in today's video is that this tool can be used to dig very deeply into an organization. So we're going to give you an example. One of our fellow instructors, Andre Geen, is going to take you through some of that material and show you the power of the treasure map methodology and also some of the software technology that would enable and support that. So it's designed to really tell you that there's a lot of power in this approach, but I don't want you to become intimidated by that if it goes too deep. And then once we've gone through our brief video, we're going to give you some headlines on the course and how you can sign up. And if you don't want to wait for the course, we'd be happy, of course, to run some of these sessions for you within your own business, and we'll give you some options to do that. So I hope you enjoy meeting Andre and learning a little bit more about how we can delve into businesses and identify that hidden treasure.
Hi, Andre again here, and Mick, thank you for that introduction. So where are we going from here? As Mick stated, we're going to be talking about the General Motors treasure map and how we can use the treasure map with a very significant sized organization, and I suppose an organization we all know, to identify essentially those one or possibly two key projects that can truly move the dial and measure the impact inside the financial statements. And then secondly, we're going to look at the tool called Global Financial Bridge in order to establish how we can easily convert a set of financial statements into our treasure map without knowing any of those key formulas or any spreadsheets or anything like that. So hopefully we can have some fun together. Thank you. So here we have our GM treasure map. First of all, we'd like to establish the time frame in which the GM treasure map has been developed. In this case, we're looking at the historical treasure map. So sometimes we can have a historical treasure map and also the future treasure map. So this really makes it very dynamic. But the historical treasure map for GM that we have in front of us is for the period from 2011 to the first half of 2014. So we've got some perspective in terms of the numbers we're looking at. And as Mick had introduced, our treasure map has the key fundamental building blocks of the money-making machine on the left-hand side, your wealth creation engine in the middle, and of course your financial statement story on the right-hand side. So let's quickly focus on the money-making machine. We notice that our revenues are around about the 150 to the $155 billion range. We see when we go to the financial statement story that tells us a little bit about how effectively we're growing. We notice that there is a slight decline in growth rate, specifically towards the most recent period of time, where our growth has gone from about 2% to negative 1.3. Automatically, what that tells us in our chapter 2, being all about how we create superior profitability, we see the sensitivity in relation to our revenue growth and the ability for us to convert that growth, be it up or down, into superior profitability. So we noticed that this last half, where our growth rate had declined by about 1.3%, reduced our profitability from 3 cents in the revenue dollar to 2 cents. So automatically about a third of our profit has been destroyed in relation to that revenue growth. Now that would automatically provide us with some real clues. We notice that our revenues, although increasing slightly, are producing margin destruction. So that's one of the key clues that we have there. So from a project viewpoint, automatically, if we can change this trend just towards what we have already been achieved, our margin restoration is worth $1.56 billion of improvement. Within a very short space of time, we have a way to establish a foundation for a very significant project. Going back to our money-making machines, with a little bit of further investigation, we noticed that the components of this revenue related to the auto division and the finance division. The auto division had a 2% decline in revenue, and our finance division had a 15% increase in revenue. So whenever you see these mix in terms of what are the key components of our revenue and our growth rate, you see two things. One, how we maintain that finance revenue growth rate. So that is all about that ability to maintain that. At the same time, of course, we need to see how these revenues are being translated towards our gross profits. And what we notice from our gross profit is that our gross profits are a little bit in the erratic side, peaking at about just a little bit over 13 cents in the revenue dollar, declining to 11 cents in the revenue dollar in the most recent period of time. Back to our relationship between growth and converting growth into superior profitabilities. The key thing there is achieving this margin restoration, delivering $1.56 billion of profit improvement through that project. We also see two things happening from a cost structure viewpoint. So not only do we understand a little bit about what's happened with our margins, but we notice with relation to our operating costs, our auto operating costs have actually declined significantly. So even though our growth rate in the auto area has gone down by 2%, our actual operating cost has declined by 13%. Yet, the benefit that we've got from these additional finance revenues have been pretty much dissipated by the increase in the finance operating expenses. So we increase our revenues by 15%, but at the same time, our operating expenses have increased by 18%. So there is automatically a little bit of a dysfunction. So from a project viewpoint, what are we wanting to determine? How do we grow without increasing our operating costs by the same degree as our growth rate, so we can get that extra benefit flowing straight to our operating profit, or our EBIT, our earnings before interest and tax. And what we see when we look at this earnings before interest and tax, we've actually had a 50% decline in our profitability during the first half. A fair amount of dynamics happening there, automatically being established through the first two chapters of our financial statement story. We notice a declining growth rate and a fairly significant decline in our profitability. Moving into our wealth creation engine, we also understand a couple of things that have happened here. From a working capital viewpoint, we do notice that our average receivable days have gone from about 54 to 52. So there's been a nice decline in the receivable environment. What we also found out about this is that by a little bit more digging, we noticed that 74% of our dealer receivables are with poor or worse category dealers. We're getting an improvement in our receivables, yet there is a degree of risk that is sitting there. So from a project viewpoint, of course, what we want to do is we want to work towards minimizing that risk. We notice from our cash environment that we've used $14 billion of cash. that has been created. So we've actually been reasonably good at creating cash, and that once again gets established in our chapter 4, that shows that we've had healthy cash flow and we've used $14 billion to reduce debt. What we want to now do is to think about the chapter 5 in our story, which is a little bit about our returns. And as you can see, how are we creating value? And this is all about the return on the invested dollar. Remember, we call this our ROCE, or return on capital employed. The key component of why our return on that invested dollar has declined is because of our poor performance in our income statement, or our money-making machine. The money-making machine has been the key reason why we have destroyed value as such. So this moves us really towards some of the key elements in relation to our treasure that we're going to focus on, and essentially from our viewpoint, what we really think is the big gorilla in the room as such, and that is all related to margin restoration. And that margin restoration, if we can only get it towards the margins that have been achieved, there is a $1.56 billion benefit to be derived. Okay, we don't want to go and bore you with the whole integrated discussion around the treasure map. This gives you a little bit of a feel for how the treasure map can be used in order to identify your next key project. At this point, there may be a little bit of apprehension. How do I establish my formulas? Where do I get the data? Do I need intensive spreadsheets in order to achieve this? These are various barriers that we may have in order to get to the true benefit that we would get from the treasure map. And that's why we'd like to introduce to you the SBTI Financial Performance Management Tool, which allows you to simply take your financials, key in very few numbers, and get all the key elements that you require in order to populate the treasure map. And I'm going to take a few minutes just to give you a quick overview of the tool. So once we've done that, what do we have? We have the capability of the treasure map, using that as a powerful communication tool with the ability to have all that sort of hard grunt work done for us. Well, hello, Andre Gein again. This time we're talking about the SBTI Financial Statement Performance Tool, known as Global Financial Bridge. This takes away all the complexities that we require in order to populate our treasure map. No more requirement for what formulas do we need to use, when do we need to use it, do we have to establish fairly sophisticated spreadsheets, etc. It's all done within this tool. Our starting point is the one-page financial statement scorecard. And for those of you that remember, you'll notice that our scorecard is very, very similar to the treasure map, with our income statement or our money-making machine on the left-hand side, our balance sheet or our wealth creation engine in the middle, and of course our 5 key chapters to our story on the right-hand side. We are now in a place where we can tell our story. And remember, using our story, we want to identify those areas of dysfunction that will guide us to the clues and treasure that we are going to deliver within our projects. In chapter 1 is our ability to grow. And then what we want to notice is how effectively we take growth and convert that into superior profitability. Of course, chapter 3 is all about the rigor around the balance sheet, with specific focus on working capital. In chapter 4, which is the domain of the king, is the combination of how well we manage the first 3 chapters. And lastly, we're talking about value, the return on our capital employed, which tells us all about how effectively we manage each dollar that we have invested in our business. So how much profit do we derive from each dollar that we have invested in our business? Well, from a growth perspective, our growth rate has declined in the most recent 6 months from a positive 2% growth rate to a negative 1.3% growth rate. And what you can see from a profitability viewpoint is how that negative growth has impacted our profit. From a 3.3 cents worth of operating profit per revenue dollar to a little bit over 1.5 cents. Growth rate going down, profitability down fairly significantly. As we stated in our working capital management, remember the hunger measure. This is all about how hungry our balance sheet is. Previously, for every dollar of revenue, we required about 8.5 cents worth of working capital. And wow, look at this. It's improved fairly significantly to about 6.5 cents worth of working capital. And then in chapter 4, we notice we've had some significant improvement in relation to our cash. Previously, our net cash consumption was about $21 billion. And during the most recent 6 months, we have created about $15 billion worth of positive cash flow. So that's a nice swing in the right direction. Lastly, chapter 5, all about value. Well, our value environment is not a good story as such, showing that our profit per invested dollar has declined from 6.5 cents to about 3.5 cents. Fairly significant decline in terms of our value creation. From our 5 chapters, what's happened? Growth is in decline, profitability is in decline, working capital is going in the right direction, cash is in the right direction, and value is in the wrong direction. So what we're wanting to do, remember, we want to take all 5 chapters and move them in the right direction. What do we need to know in terms of how we're going to create that real project, the project that's going to create significant value? Well, let's look at the dysfunction between growth and our ability to create superior profitability. Well, simply by going into our profitability box, what do we notice? We notice that our margins have declined from about 13 cents to 11 cents. First thing we want to do is measure the impact of margin destruction. So all I'll do is I'll move our margins to what we've already achieved. So we're not going to try and create significant improvement yet. The first stage, what did we achieve? Because that's believable. Let's have a quick look. This is what our business would look like if we had this negative decline in our growth, yet we managed to keep our margins what they used to be. What sort of benefit that would derive inside our financial statements? Well, if we could have had and maintained that 2% margin destruction, we would have had $1.5 billion worth of profit improvement. $1.5 billion. Now that's quite significant. In addition to that, our cash would have improved by about $405,000, and you can see from your value creation improved our return on our investment by nearly 5 cents. Getting out of there, we just simply press the scorecard button, and I'm going to press the undo button to return to our original number. Moving from profitability to working capital, this shows us how we can review the various areas of our working capital, noticing that our inventories have increased from 38 days to 40 days. If we could bring our inventory management or our key supply chain back to what it used to be, what sort of improvement would that have provided us, at least in relation to the king? Well, that looks like it's $173 million. It's not as significant as what our profit improvement or our money-making machine focus would be. So maybe this would be potentially a project, but a project for possibly a later date. So automatically you can get some degree of understanding in terms of the sensitivities and how these projects will really impact the financial performance improvement, which provides us with some strong evidence. And remember, this is what we want. We want financial statement evidence in relation to our projects. Hopefully, that's given you a little bit of a taste, very small taste, as to what's coming in terms of your financial results mastery course. At SBTI, we are very excited about this because we've noticed that there is a significant demand. I think we're going to all have a lot of fun, and hopefully we're going to see you soon.
Well, thank you, Andre, for that demonstration. I think we've shown that this is a very exciting methodology for identifying opportunity and for getting buy-in within the organization and elevating your ability to speak the language of finance, to motivate people to take action. So let's just headline for you the outline of the Financial Results Mastery course. The objectives, firstly, it's to help business leaders, change agents, continuous improvement professionals, identify projects that deliver the most value. That's the most critical thing that we've seen in our 17-year history is selecting the right projects and having a tight linkage between the projects and the financial statements will help you do that. Secondly, we're going to show how those projects link to the financial statements, specifically how they generate higher revenues, greater profitability, and predictable and sustainable cash flows. We're going to teach you the treasure map methodology so that you can actually get people excited, garner support and engagement for more meaningful, more significant projects. Once we get people to understand this causal linkage between the projects and the financial statements, what we find is that the adoption rate of those projects goes up enormously because people believe in them, you get executive support, and people stay the course until those improvements are embedded within the fabric of the organization. And lastly, you'll become fluent in the language of finance, and that will improve your change management and leadership skills and help you with many of the activities and strategic initiatives in your career within the organization. Now, in terms of the overview of the course, it's going to be held over 3 days in our training center in San Marcos, Texas. It's going to be highly interactive. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you won't need a Boolean logic calculator. This is not about a bunch of numbers and a bunch of spreadsheets and a ton of calculations. This is all about the power of story, the power of meaning, getting behind the numbers to create compelling calls to action so that your organization will launch projects and sustain projects that will ultimately manifest in huge performances in financial and operating outcomes. So we're going to introduce the treasure map itself and the methodology. We're going to teach you about the basic building blocks of the financial statements, really, really powerful, really easy way to understand and navigate the statements. We're going to look at the balance between top line and bottom line projects, and we'll show, using those basic building blocks, the difference between having top line projects and bottom line projects. So having a balance of those in your portfolio is important. Then we're going to go through a case study where you'll be taking a company example, and we'll help you work through and develop the 5 chapters of the story to understand what's behind that company and where those opportunities will exist. And there'll be as many as 3 groups of 6 people in the session, so you're going to get some real insight from other people, and you'll be working together in teams, so there'll be a lot of situational learning. And then we're going to show how to create that causal link between your projects and powerful financial outcomes. Then we're going to have a second case study where you'll build the treasure map in a little bit more detail, and we'll have some interactive presentations. That'll be a lot of fun. And lastly, we'll give you some tips on how you can now take this methodology and this approach into your own organization in a very simple but powerful way to elevate your Lean Sigma or continuous improvement efforts. So if you look further onto this page, you'll see a link for the course and the course dates. We'd love to see you on the course. We think this is going to make a big difference and add to your portfolio of skills.